Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. Today's guest is Kentucky writer Silas House. House began his career with 4 successful novels and has recently written 3 plays set in his native Appalachia. I spoke with Silas House at Gorham's Bluff Lodge as a part of the annual celebration of Southern literature at Northeast Alabama Community College. Silas, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Last time we were talking, you had just written, I think, the introduction to a volume of stuff about mountaintop removal.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And you were hot on the subject.
Yeah.
And I bet you still are. What's going on in those mountains?
Well, there's so many battles to fight. We don't know where to start, you know.
What are you doing?
Well, right now in Kentucky, the big fight is for teachers trying to hold on to their pensions and equal rights and, you know, trying to make sure women are treated well and that gay people are treated well and that we don't get all of our arts funding slashed. So it's just one thing after another.
What about the environment?
Well, that definitely.
Are coal mines opening up? I mean,
no.
Is that all right? Tell me about this.
Well, I mean, I think that unfortunately the coal industry is done, in pretty much for the most part.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just sort of, from my point of view, from everything that I know and I have read, it's killed itself. It's mechanized itself out, you know, because the machines are so quick and so powerful. They can, you know, they just got everything that was there just about, and they pushed people, human beings, out of the picture and started using more machines. And of course, the industry blamed it on other people and other things because they didn't want to blame it on themselves. So coal's not coming back in Kentucky. I mean, I'm from a coal mining family, and so, you know, that's always it's complicated. Because on one hand, it's your culture. It's a big part of my culture that's dying or is dead. On the other hand, it's better for the environment, but it's not great for the economy. Mostly because we're cursed with legislators who just won't talk about transition, you know, and et cetera, et cetera. So Kentucky's in a hard place right now, but the people are strong and the people are spirited and they're doing a lot of great stuff, and you know, there's all kinds of grassroots stuff happening.
Are the individual towns reinventing themselves in the way that one hopes? What directions are they reinventing themselves in? You are now, whether you like it or not, you've become a spokesman for Appalachia. Well, you are sitting at the top of Appalachian literature, which is now a thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I guess all I can try to represent is my one little postage stamp size part of Appalachia that I know. You know, I mean, there are many Appalachias, but one thing that I'm excited about in the region is there's a great foods movement. Uh-huh. You know, there's so many food deserts in Appalachia, so there are lots of groups fighting against that. So now there's lots of farmers markets coming in. There's some farm-to-table restaurants happening all over the place. I never thought I would see that in my hometown.
There used to be farm-to-table, except it was your farm and your table.
Right. You know, just real initiatives started by people on the ground. You know, there's initiatives to keep people in the region, to find ways to make the economy happen.
Yes.
You know, little towns like, there's a little town called Whitesburg, Kentucky. That was a real coal mining place. And now they're a place where people go there to eat, and they go there to see music, and there's a moonshine distillery on Main Street, you know, and that sort of thing.
I see moonshine in stores now.
Right, but sort of, yeah. I sort of feel like if it's really moonshine, you shouldn't be able to go to a liquor store and buy it.
No,
you know?
No, it seems wrong. I mean, It's supposed to be illegal. Right. We're supposed to hide it.
That's part of the deliciousness of it.
But your literature, you're in a tradition now. The roots of this stuff, as I understand it, is what it's James Still, it's Jesse Stewart, it's who else? Who do you think of as your ancestors in Appalachian literature?
James Steele and Lee Smith are the two ones that come to mind for me.
She hears that you think of her as an ancestor. We're gonna
Well,
have
I
something
wouldn't
to
say an
here.
ancestor, but a mother figure
All
for
right,
sure.
sure.
I mean, for me, Lee Smith was the reason that I mean, when I was growing up, I didn't know there was such a thing as Appalachian literature. I mean, I knew James Steele lived a couple of counties away and that he was a well-known poet and novelist, but it wasn't until I read Lee Smith that I saw people who, they were talking the way my family talked, and they were eating the foods that my people were eating, and they were concerned about the issues my people were concerned about. So I had this recognition of my own culture, and that was mind-blowing for me.
And it has existed. Wendell
Yes.
for this kind of
Wendell, especially for the environment. I mean,
Yeah.
I was always environmentally minded, but it was in 2005 that Wendell Berry wrote me a letter and said, I want you to go with me to tour a mountaintop removal site, that I really became an environmentalist.
Yeah.
Because I understood that living in that culture, I had a responsibility to make a decision about that and what to say about it, and to educate myself better in it. Even though I grew up in it, I really had to learn all the facts about it. So Wendell Berry is the reason that I'm an environmentalist.
Yeah. Well, that's become cohesive. I mean, you're going to a conference of Appalachian studies, which didn't exist 20 years ago. I don't imagine.
I'm not for sure how long they've been around. I think they've been around about 35 years or so, but it's certainly grown.
Yeah.
And it's something that people actually recognize now. It's not just this splinter group, you know. It's a very big conference that's widely attended and is part of the national scene.
Yeah. When we spoke, I think you and I, this is our third time. I'm pretty sure
I think so.
the first time we talked, you were a through and through novelist. You had Clay's Quilt and Parchment of Leaves and Eli the Good and one other, which does not pop into my head at the moment.
Same Son Here, maybe?
No, that's newer.
I'm not sure what it
but
was.
you sort of, you haven't abandoned the novel altogether, because I know you have one in the future. But you've gone in a couple of different directions, and Same Son Here is one of those directions. You've gone to middle grade, and it is an epistolary novel between who and who?
A 12-year-old boy living in eastern Kentucky,
Yeah.
and a 12-year-old South Asian Indian girl living in Chinatown in New York.
And we should say you wrote this with.
Yes. Neela Vaswani.
Yeah.
And I wrote the parts from the point of view of the boy in Kentucky.
Sure. And how did you get up with her?
We teach together at Spalding University in Louisville, and we're just really close friends. And we were both working on separate novels, and we were talking about, trying to get those done. And we realized that we could write to each other in those characters and maybe see what happened, and it ended up a novel.
Well, I can offer an explanation of the aim of the novel, but that's not the point. What do you think of as the point of the novel?
The real point to me about the novel is that we're all more alike than we think we are. And that, if you put those two characters side by side, they look so differently, and they speak very differently. But when they get to know each other, they realize their cultures are very similar. They're both from highland cultures, for instance.
Are they?
Her family are from the mountains of India, and his are from the mountains of America. And
These are mountain folk.
right. And so it's it's about immigration. It's about how poor people are always negated and run over.
Why did your partner choose to have her character living in Chinatown?
I think that's just where she was living at the time, and she was walking, and that sensory experience every day she was able to put in
Yeah.
the book, and I think that it makes the book more vivid in that way.
Yeah, and it's middle grade means grades 6 through 8, or what is it? I'm never quite sure.
I'm
about
not
these
sure.
things,
I
but-
mean, I always think that any good book can be read by any age,
Sure,
pretty much.
I think so too. Yeah.
So I think more adults have read Same Sun Here than kids, but I think it starts about fifth grade appropriate, and then on up, I think.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it's not blue.
Right.
No.
Although there's always somebody that complains about something.
Something I noticed reading along in it is his language in writing is not as country as spoken Eastern Kentucky would be in my ear. It's almost as if your boy there is not formal exactly, but he's it's not as dialectical as it would be if they were chatting.
Yeah, it's because he's writing letters.
Yes,
and
exactly.
so any dialect speaker, I think, always does less. There's just something that is formalizing about writing a letter.
It is. It is. It's a.
So that was a hard balance to pull off,
Yes.
because I want to have that flavor of the place, but also make it realistic in that way.
Right.
So I tried to get at that in the scenes of dialogue.
You have this venture into middle grade, epistolary novel, and now there are 3 plays as well. The play, This Is My Heart for You. How, this is not how do you feel about it? Is this a activist play? Is this a social protest play? What is it?
It was a play
Tell me about
written. It was written especially for a community and a region to have a conversation.
Yeah.
It was sort of, at plays often you'll have talkbacks. So at the end of the play, the cast will come out and they'll talk to the audience.
Right.
And so really it was a play written for the talkback. There was a lot of really terrible things happening in Appalachia during this one summer. A gay couple was kicked out of a swimming pool in Hazard, Kentucky. The manager quoted the Bible to them when he kicked them out of a city-owned property. Of course, that's problematic.
Sure.
There was an interracial couple who were a church refused to let them get married because they were interracial. There was a boy, a young man who was beaten to the point of almost dying, and he jumped over a cliff to get away from his assaulters, and they were beating him because he was gay. It was the first federally tried hate crime, and that was
In Kentucky or?
Well, it was the first federally tried, period.
At all?
Yes.
Ah.
Always before they had just been tried by states, and then there was a federal law. Anyway, there were just several things that happened, and so I sort of combined all those events and tried to put a human face on it, and so it all revolves around this one little family. And one of the boys in the play is one of the boys who's gotten kicked out of the pool. And I wanted to do that because I thought it'd be cool to have a swimming pool on stage. As a playwright, you're always thinking of the stage picture.
Yeah.
You're always thinking what's going to be on stage and how interesting is that going to be. And so I thought a swimming pool would be pretty interesting.
And I have not seen this done. What does it look like?
The productions I've seen so far, and I haven't seen all the productions, but they have, I've only seen 2, and they both used lighting to make the pool. It looks really great.
Right. There was a play on Broadway many years ago, a British play called The Changing Room, in which was the locker room of a rugby team. And they put a pool on stage, and all the characters were naked.
Oh, wow.
They were all men, and they were all naked, and they splashed water all over, and people in the first 2 rows got it too.
I don't have any nudity or water.
No, it's a good idea for this. I just read recently your volume, The Hurting Part, The Evolution of an American Play, and I was fascinated by it. You have a little essay, followed by a short story, and then the transformation of the short story into a 3-act play, and then a Q&A with you about the whole process. And this is about a topic of great interest to Americans, Kentuckians in Ohio.
Right. If only the hurting part had sold as many copies as Hillbilly Elegy.
And it's set in 1962, 2 days before Christmas,
Uh-huh.
just about 2 days before Christmas, 1962. There are two couples. They're in the story, there is a girl, and she's writing home. It's again, it's a letter. But in the play, there are two couples, and they're miserable. Kentuckians travel poorly, like some French wine.
Well, I think there's just something, when you're from Appalachia, period, and I would even say the South, there's just something that even when you leave it, it doesn't leave you, and it keeps pulling you back. And so the play is very much about that. Jim Wayne Miller is one of my favorite poets. He's from North Carolina, but lived in Kentucky many years, and he says that the most common Appalachian malady is homesickness. And I think that's very true. So the whole play is about homesickness. It's a true story of my family. My aunt always told me about living in Dayton, Ohio one year, and she was so homesick that at Christmas time she became physically ill, in a department store, and sort of had a breakdown.
Thelma Jean says, "I think I'm going to die."
Yes, right.
People could die of homesickness, I suppose.
Yeah, she thought she was going to. Yeah.
The tension, I've spent a lot of time in Greece and a lot of time in Ireland. And both those countries,
Me too, in Ireland.
Both those countries, for 100 years, there's been no employment. For 100 years, the Irish and Greek men, and sometimes, especially with Ireland, women as well, go off to find work, and they stay.
Yeah.
And sometimes they never get back.
Right.
The Irish wake.
Yeah. One of my favorite novels is about that. It's called Brooklyn.
Yes,
Colin Tobin.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. He's a genius.
Yeah.
He's the real thing. Kentuckians Spanish Basque shepherds go and herd sheep in Idaho for 20 years. Then they go back with their pensions and live again in Spain. Kentuckians moved to Dayton, Ohio, and some stay. But J.D. Vance with Hillbilly Elegy has written about the grandchildren of the people you wrote about. Doesn't seem to be working.
Well, it didn't work for me. It works for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people really love that book. I find it a problematic book because it operates too much in generalizations, and it also just, I don't know how you can possibly write a book that's seen as being the final word on the Appalachian experience, and you never even talk about extractive economy. I mean, extractive economy has defined who we are as Appalachian people. And he never really goes into that properly. He doesn't know the historical and cultural context of what he's talking about.
But those people in his book are the people who were not so homesick that they had to go back. They stayed.
Yeah.
And they prospered with the factories, and then they declined with the factories. Right. That's not their fault.
Yeah.
I mean, any more than.
And I had lots of family who went and they couldn't stand it and they came back. But I also had family who stayed.
Right.
And lived through those booms and busts.
Right.
Yeah. I always want to make a disclaimer that I don't think it's a malicious book. I just think he doesn't fully understand the region that he's been made to be an expert on.
I think we were looking for a voice to explain something to us. He wrote his book, and we all agreed that he was the. I don't know that he set out to be the sole voice or the expert.
That's sort of my other problem with the book is that
dumped on him.
I feel like it gives Americans everything they want to hear about Appalachians. They're all drug addicts, they're all lazy, they're all violent, et cetera, et cetera. There are just too many of those stereotypes are in there. Right. That's not my family.
No, of course not. No. The play it's not sentimental, but it is touching. These people are these are your aunts and uncles. These are the people who were themselves the movers, not 2 generations later. But Patty and Thelma are living in Dayton, Ohio, and they're from Eastern Kentucky. And this is the very, very first bit of dialogue. I've just marked a little bit.
Okay.
Read that as Patty and Thelma would do it.
Patty. So then what happened? Patty sits down at the table while Thelma gets out cups. Thelma. When I came back with the drinks, I said, "Did you all decide?" Like I always do. And they asked me to repeat myself again. I did, and they just busted out laughing. And then I realized they was making fun of my accent. Patty, people are unbelievable. Thelma. So I said, "Is there something funny?" And the little short one, he said, "Yeah, that hillbilly talk." So I reached in right quick, and I just tipped his Pepsi over into his lap. Patty laughs, claps her hands. Thelma. And he just couldn't get over that. He was stunned, his whole lap soaking wet. I grabbed a big wad of napkins and threw them on the table in front of him, and I said, "Well, I'm such a stupid hillbilly, I've spilt your drink all over you." And that was the story my aunt told me.
Is that right? Is that right?
That she was, it was just constant, that the way she taught was made fun of, and sometimes she fought back.
Well, you've got 3 plays now, and are the other 2 published?
One of them is.
Yeah.
This Is My Heart For You is published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand that by the time this show airs, you will have another novel.
Yes.
And what is it? You have some of it? Tell me about it.
It's called Southernmost, and it's about a preacher who has a crisis of conscience and has preached in his church for 10 years, very, very conservative. And then when his brother comes out to him, he just really, for many years, he searches himself on how to feel about that and goes through this real evolution. He's rejected his brother and he hasn't seen him for 10 years. But then something happens specifically that he has to stand up in his church and say, "I can no longer do this." And when he does, he loses his church, his wife, and his wife takes custody of his little boy away from him. So he kidnaps him and goes off to
When he stands
Key
up
West.
for his brother?
Well, he stands up for a gay couple in the community who's been treated badly. And so when he kidnaps his little boy, he runs off to Key West because he thinks his brother's there, and he wants to go and rectify the situation, and to steal his little boy. So it's called Southernmost because it's set in Key West, the southernmost point.
Yes, sure.
But it's also called Southernmost because I think that the South is more of a mirror of America than it is the other of America. So it's about how America is more Southern than it wants to admit that it is. They just want to put all the racism, all the homophobia, all the misogyny on us in the South, and then they're off scot-free. That's what I think.
This will not sell in Massachusetts.
Well, I'm hoping it will speak to them because
It should.
because that's what the book is about. Is that it's an American issue, and not just a Southern issue.
Yeah. Have you got a chunk of it that you think would?
I'll just read the
would
first
be right to read?
paragraph. The rain had been falling with a pounding meanness, without ceasing for 2 days, and then the water rose all at once in the middle of the night. A brutal rush, so fast Asher thought at first a dam might have broken somewhere upstream. The ground had simply become so saturated it could not hold any more water. All the creeks were conspiring down the ridges until they washed out into the Cumberland. There was no use in anyone going to bed because they all knew what was going to happen. They only had to wait. So this catastrophic flood sort of is the impetus for everything because these 2 men their house is swept away and nobody will let them stay the night with them.
Oh, they're a couple.
Yes.
And their house is swept away.
And so the preacher sees that this is just a bridge too far for him. So he has to say something.
Right.
Yeah.
So your activism is, what was mountaintop removal has now spread out into another number of social issues.
I think social justice is social justice. To go back to James Steele, he once said, "What happens in Afghanistan happens to me." And so that's really something that I live by, is that, injustice is injustice is injustice. And I really think that it has to be part of our daily lives to fight against that in any way we can. The book I'm working on right now is a parable about the refugee crisis.
Oh.
So, it's about an American refugee trying to get into Ireland in, like 2 years in the future. So,
What are the issues for that?
I'm trying to be as vague as possible about all that because it's just a parable for any refugee, and how people have to make that decision. Should I help the refugee or not?
Well, the American who successfully migrates to Ireland is the luckiest, happiest
Right.
refugee on the planet.
Yeah.
Oh, Silas, this is a pleasure as usual. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Good to see you. Thank you.